All right. The last section of this is buy, rent, or lease. And basically what it's doing is it's checking to see what is the best option for somebody that, there's points in our life in which we have money in which we can probably purchase a vehicle. There's points in our life where we should maybe buy a place to live. There are points in our life where we may want to rent a place to live. You guys are going into that situation right away in a year's time. All right. Sometimes leasing a vehicle makes sense. Okay. There are different circumstances where you are at, and to find out what is the best option for you, maybe based on a couple things. The first thing that you want to look is, what do you have for money right now to spend immediately? Because if you're going to buy a car, if you're going to buy a house, you probably need some money up front in order to do that. Okay? For those of you that are going to rent a place next year, they may ask you to have the first and the last month's rent ahead of time. They may ask you to have a damage deposit right then and there. That may deter some of you from the place that you're looking at. Okay, you may not have $1,200, $1,600 right up front to pay that out right away. So what we're just going to simply do today is we're going to look at an example that takes all of that into account. And we still use our solver program in order to find out whether or not buying is the best bet for us. Okay? One of the other things that we haven't done yet that we have to do is we have to start looking at a sample question when we are buying a house. We have to start looking at, is it going to make money for us in the long run? Is it going to lose money for us? And we have to look at all the scenarios for that. And that is the couple questions in here that are going to are a lot of work, but they're really good questions to look at to find out where we're at. So take a look in your book right now. For the 8 of you that are staring into space and not listening, read to keep in mind right now. When deciding whether to rent, buy, with or without financing, or lease, each situation is unique. A cost and benefit analysis should take everything into account. Costs include initial costs and fees, short-term costs, long-term costs, disposable income, the cost of financing, depreciation and appreciation, penalties for breaking contracts, and equity. Benefits include convenience, commitments, flexibility, and personal needs or wants, such as how often you want to buy a new car. When renting, leasing, and buying, you often need to make up payments up front. Some payments go toward the overall cost, such as a down payment on a house or a lease deposit, and the first and last month's rent. Other deposits, such as a rental damage deposit, may be refunded at a later date. Appreciation and depreciation affect the value of property. They are usually expressed as a rate per year. Equity can make buying a house a form of investment. Now, I explained this to you on the first day of the loans part of this. When you put money down on a house, your payment is going to create equity in that house. So how much equity you get out of that house is the amount of money that is taken off of your payment for interest. The rest of it is all what we refer to as equity in the house. So if you put a down payment of $25,000 onto a house, that $25,000 is your initial equity in the house. Then when you make a payment on it, part of that payment goes to the equity and part of that payment goes to the interest that the bank is charging you. Okay? Now most housing properties will appreciate. They will go up in value. Okay? Vehicles depreciate the moment you take them off the lot. Basically, a brand new vehicle, you lose 25% the moment you drive it off the lot. Okay, so vehicles are not a good investment, so to speak. All right, because they are going to depreciate in value, which makes perfect sense because they're going to be used, and you're going to lose the value in it. Okay, so the first one we look at is a university student A girl is going to go to University of BC in Vancouver. She's been hired to complete a 16-week work term in White Rock, about 50 kilometers from Vancouver. She's considering 3 options. The first is renting a room and a bed and breakfast in White Rock for $400 per week. The cost would include all utilities and meals. The second is leasing an apartment in White Rock for $1,200 per month. She must pay the first and last month's rent up front, plus a refundable damage deposit of $2,000. She also needs to pay about $200 per month in utilities. The third option is buy a used car for $12,000 on credit with regular monthly payments of $1,000 in interest at 3.2% compounded monthly. She would live in Vancouver with her parents for free and commute to White Rock daily. Driving costs such as gas, insurance, and maintenance would be about $250 per week. The car will depreciate in value by 20% each year. Which option would you advise Morag to choose and why? Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is the rent. Rent a room and a bed and breakfast, $400 per week. The cost will include all utilities and meals. Okay, so 16 times 400.
6,400.
Okay, so the first thing would be $6,400 rent. What is the positives and the negatives against the rent?
You don't own the house?
You don't own anything. That's right. That's your first negative. You have nothing to show for it at the end. At the end of 16 weeks, you've paid $6,400 and you have nothing to show for it. That's 100% correct. All right? That's basically the biggest negative towards it. All right? What are some of the other positives or negatives? Can anybody think of anything? You guys, this is an important one for you. You're about to rent a place next fall. What are the positives and negatives to renting? Go ahead, CJ.
You like break something, you don't have to pay. Or if something breaks and you don't break it, you don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, so that's a positive. If there is something like, if you have a wash, and these are all things that you got to take into account when you're looking next year. Doesn't have a washer and dryer. If it has a washer and dryer, if something happens to it, like CJ said, the landlord has to take care of that. Okay, unless you've done damage to it, the landlord has to take care of that. So that's not something that you have to worry about. Not a lot of places come with washer and dryers. Complexes do. All right, so within the actual rental facility, there could be a washer and dryer maybe in the basement. There might be washing facilities in there. So that's something to look at as well. What are the other positives and negatives of renting a place?
If someone wants, like if the apartment or whatever it is up for sale, someone can come look at it and then get kicked out if they want to buy it.
Yeah. No real agreement. They would have to give you a certain number of days, but there is no, you're not really locked into that agreement. Unless it's the landlord, then he'll lock you into that agreement. Let's say something comes up 3 weeks into the practicum and you decide that rent's not the best way to go about things. I found something else. Maybe somebody says, oh, hey, I've got a place in the basement suite that you can just stay for, but then you're locked into that. You're already going to pay for that $400. All right. Anything else that you want to, positives or negatives to renting a place?
It's like a regular payment, so like sometimes, most of the time you would like plan ahead and all, but sometimes if you run into like a rainy day or something like that, and your car breaks down or something, you can't afford that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're locked in for $400. There's no flexibility there. The $400 has to be paid. Has to be paid.
But I think it's hard to come up with that every week.
Yes. That's I think exactly Jules' point. There might be a time where that $400 may be difficult to come up with, but you have to take that all into account. You basically got to look at it and say, okay, I've got to be able to come up with $6,400. Okay. Now you don't need it day one, but you're certainly going to need it at the end of the week one, and then at the end of week two, and so on, right? Okay. So renting the place.
Also, seafood's in there too.
In this one, it's a bed and breakfast, so the meals are included, utilities included. Utilities is a big one, really big one, all right? Because they are quite costly. So utilities, water, hydro, all right? Even television, cable, all right? Internet hookups, Wi-Fi. Those things, if those are all inclusive, that's great. But if they're not, you're looking at, water can be 40, 50 bucks a month. Hydro could be 200 a month, depending on whether or not it's electric heat or not, right? Your internet, $50 a month minimum. So those are things that you have to look at. Those are on top of the already $400 you gotta pay a week, okay? Lease is the next. So the lease agreement says it's going to cost her $1,200 per month. She must pay first and last month's rent up front, plus a refundable damage deposit of $2,000. She also needs to pay about $200 per month for all utilities. Okay, so let's, first of all, 4 months by $1,200, right? So $4,800. But we also have to add on what?
2,000 for the damage.
Not yet. Just we're going to come back to that one. But that's a very good point.
$200.
$200 per month. So another $800, right? So this guy is $5,600. Okay. So it's $1,200 less. What? 800 less, sorry, not 1,200, 800. You're right, thanks. 800 less, but we also have to pay for food.
Damage.
Okay.
Furniture is not furnished.
Yeah.
Utilities aren't included.
Right. So your utilities. So the difference, $800, probably between food and utilities alone, right? Okay. But what's the other issue with the lease? Well, what do I need day one?
The first and last.
The first and last, that's $2,400. Plus I need $2,000 for a damage deposit. So on day one, I need $4,400 on day one before I get in there. Might be doable. But then again, you're still looking at probably, I would say, quite a bit more than $800 in food and utilities, would be my guess. So a lease agreement, it's not usually something that you look at in terms of living. A rent and a lease agreement are very similar. The lease agreement is more for property that, like private property that's owned, and you'd be looking at leasing a condo or something out of a complex like that, more so than an apartment. It'd be something bigger. The one thing that lease agreements do tend to have, or do tend to lend to, is a buyout thing at the end of it. Lease agreements, especially vehicles, you can lease a vehicle for a couple of years, and then they'll give you a buyout at the end of the 2 years or at the end of the lease agreement, and it's usually considerably less than what you would buy a new car for day one. Okay, so what that means is that if you leased it for 2 years, you've already put money into it. They take that into account, and then they'll allow you to buy out the vehicle at the end if that's what you want to do. But when it comes to these places, the lease agreement, it works very similar to what a rent agreement is. All right, you have to sign a contract, and that's basically what a lease is. It's a contract to rent it there. Now, the lease agreement, I'm not sure. I would say it has more stability, I think, than a rent agreement, possibly, but I don't know. I think they're both contracts that are going to be dealt with between the landlord and yourself and the lawyer. Go ahead, guys.
So say if you were going to lease vehicle versus financing a vehicle.
Let's go back. Let's wait. I'll come back to the vehicle part in a minute, okay? I just want to finish the living one first, and then I want to specifically talk about cars, between lease and financing and all that, yeah.
Would you say for lease, would that be more for long-term rather than rent?
Yeah,
Or-
yeah, like, yeah, I would say, geez, I don't know. I think a lease agreement is, that's a good question here.
Um,
I actually think a lease agreement would be more on a monthly basis than a rental agreement. I think a rental agreement, you're gonna be locked in for a certain period of time. So like, for example, one of the things they'll do, and this is something you need to pay attention to, one of the things they'll do is they'll get you to sign a 1-year lease, okay? Which maybe you're right, maybe the lease agreement would lock you in longer. So you're only going to school for 8 months, right? So some of you are gonna come home after the 8 months, but you are still paying that lease agreement for the other 4 months that you're not in school, right? So then what do you do? Well, a lease agreement may allow you to sublet your apartment you're living out for the summer to somebody, okay? So that's, we might want to take a little more look at the difference between lease and rent. You should want to take a look at the difference between lease and rent because you are going to school next year, okay? But that's something that we would, you might be right. Lease might be a more long-term, locked-in than what the rent is. Rent could be by month. Lease could be, hey, you've got a contract, you have to uphold that contract for a year. Okay, so that may make more sense, I believe. Okay, so there's your two. Depending, this looks cheaper, but in the long run, I don't believe it is cheaper because we still have other costs to it. All right, so then now we get into the financing of a vehicle. So let's have a look at this car. Buy a used car for $12,000 on credit with regular monthly payments of $1,000 and interest at 3.2% compounded monthly. She live in Vancouver with her parents for free and commute to White Rock daily. Driving costs such as gas, insurance, maintenance would be about $250 per week, and then the car depreciates. Okay, so let's find out. Okay, so first of all, we are comparing for the 16 weeks, right? So, what we want to do first is let's find out what this vehicle is going to cost us. Okay? And it says $1,000 payments. $1,000 payments, and she's going to make those payments monthly, right? So for the 4-month term, how much is it going to cost her for that vehicle? So let's just start with that. She's going to make $4,000 in payments, right? Plus $250 per week times 16 weeks, right? So let's find out how much it's going to cost over the 16-week period.
I might have done that last 8,000.
What do you get?
8,000.
Excuse me. Yeah, 8,000. So already, when you're looking at this situation, it is quite a bit more money to begin with than what it would be for her to rent a place or lease a place, right? Okay? But what does she have at the end of this? She has a vehicle at the end of this. Okay? So what we want to do now is let's find out how long it takes her to pay off this vehicle. So she's got a 3.2% present value. She borrowed 12 grand. $1,000 payments. 0 payments per year is 12. Compounds per year is 12 as well. So let's find out how many payments that is.
Yeah.
12.212. So we times that by 1,000, so how much is she gonna pay? Times that by 1,000 so we get full decimals.
12,200.
4.45. Okay. So what was the interest that she paid on that? What was it?
212.
212.45 cents, right? Okay. So that's the interest she paid. We got the interest. That's not a lot. All right. She has that money. She gets that money, if she were to sell the car, she would get some of that back. But it also says though that the car depreciates. Okay. So she did this in about a year, right? A year and 0.212 months. Okay, or sorry, 0.212 years. So the car depreciates by 20%. So let's look at the depreciation now. And the depreciation, I'm just following through in the book here. They also said, we added the 4,000 right here, this 4,000 right there, onto the initial 4,000. But what they're saying is, well, it actually would cost her this. It would cost her $16,000 because of the $250 per week of gas and everything. So it would cost her $16,212.45. But let's find out what that vehicle is worth at the end of that. So let's go 12,000. And let's take 0.2 of 12,000. 2,400 off of 12,000. So basically at the end of it, at the end of the year, well for sure at the end of the year, but it'll be a little bit slightly less than that. If she were to sell that car, she'd have what, let's say $9,600, correct? That means then that if she doesn't keep the car, she would still have paid all of this off in the end. Okay? So if you look at the options, it says buying the car costs far more than the other options, but she will have the car for much longer than 4 months. It will retain some value for about 5 years. Also, she'll have more mobility. Leasing the apartment seems to be the least, but if Morag expects to spend more than $800 or $50 a week on food, then the bed and breakfast would be the least. And any option is reasonable. I advise Morag to choose the bed and breakfast because it costs the least once the food is factored in. And she would not have a long commute every morning and evening. Okay, so what we have just looked at was basically a scenario that you could be in yourself. All right, let's say some of you or one of you or whatever was deciding that you're going to go to the college that's in Dauphin or the college that's in Yorkton. Okay, they're off camp. They're satellite campuses. Now you got to look at it. Let's use Yorkton. You got an 80 kilometer an hour drive. 80 kilometer drive. You should drive 80 kilometers an hour. I've seen some of you guys drive. 80 kilometers drive to Yorkton and back each day, 5 days a week. Does it make more sense for you to buy a vehicle, to rent a place in Yorkton, to lease a place in Yorkton? Those are all options that are very legit that you may have to be looking into come next spring. All right, this is a perfect example for you to how you want to figure it out. What do you have saved for money? Can you afford a vehicle? Can you afford to pay rent, monthly rent? Are you going to work in Yorkton? Are you going to work at home? Those are all things that you have to take into account. And you are the ones that have to take into those factors sooner than later. Because you're about a year away, most of you, from making those decisions. Okay? Any comments or questions about it?
Where'd
Yeah,
the
Mark.
4,000 come in?
250 by 16. There's $250 for car maintenance and gas each week.
Okay.
Okay? Look at the bottom of the third statement, right almost at the bottom of page 46, Morgan. It says driving costs such as gas, insurance, and maintenance would be about $250 per week.
Okay.
Over 16 weeks, that's $4,000.
Okay.
Okay? Comments about this question in particular? Some of you have lost already, some of you are paying attention. Oops. Okay, let's go to your question now. Your question was about leasing and financing, correct?
Yeah, so like, the difference, like, is like leasing, basically what it is, it's almost like you're renting it,
Yes,
renting a vehicle. And
unless
then
you decide to buy it.
Yeah, unless you decide to buy it, doesn't, like, sure, probably the payments are lower, but you don't really have much, like, equity in there after.
It depends on the lease agreement itself. If the lease agreement says you can put all of your lease, like, they'll take some off interest, obviously. But if you have, let's say you have a $200 payment and 180 of that is gonna go towards equity at the end if you choose to buy it out. That's what essentially what's happening. Okay, the only reason to, I'm not really sure. I know people that lease vehicles and they consistently do it every 2 years. The good and the bad, the good, you always have brand new vehicle, which means you always have warranty on the vehicle. Okay? You're in control of the mileage, so depending on how much you drive. So let's say that you are leasing that vehicle and your job is to be a sales rep. I'm just hypothetically, and you have to tour around and you're going to put on a lot of miles. It's maybe better to lease a vehicle and put a lot of miles on that vehicle rather than do it on your own private vehicle, because you're going to lose money anytime you put mileage onto it. You're going to lose money off of it, right? So the lease versus buying, lease, if you keep the mileage down and you want to buy it out at the end, that's good. That's a good thing too. Usually you get a better rate. You still have a brand new vehicle. You're still on warranty. So leasing that vehicle and then buying it out at the end, not a terrible idea, right? How does it work versus financing? Financing, you're basically paying interest, but you're still putting equity into that vehicle. But I don't know how much equity you get because it depreciates so much. But at least it's yours. At least it's yours at the end of it, for sure. Right? I mean, help. Any other questions about leasing, buying, vehicles, houses? Go ahead, Emma.
So when you lease, do you have to wait out to 2 years, or can you buy it out before?
Probably with a penalty. That would be my guess. They would likely charge you a small amount because they want to still compensate for the amount of interest they're going to lose on it. But that's not guaranteed. That could be something that you could work into your lease agreement.
Would you just buy out the interest then? Like you would have to buy it out and would you?
Possibly. Yes. Like, that's what I mean. Like I'm not sure because I've never leased or leased to own, but I think that is something that would be in the contract. It would give you a set. I know on a mortgage that's what happens. You'll get a penalty fee, and basically it's to cover, and it won't cover all the interest. All right. So like if you want to pay your mortgage out early, there will be a fee for it, but it's not going to be the amount of interest that you would owe if you were to pay it out payment-wise all the way through.
Oh, so it would be cheaper to buy it out.
Yes, always. Always. One of the things that we do need to look at as we go through here today will be questions 7 and 8 on On page 50, those are big questions. Those are ones that talk about mortgages and what happens if I take a 15-year mortgage or a 20-year mortgage out and then I sell my house after 5 years. How much is it worth at 5-year mark? How much do I make money off of it, or do I lose money off of it? Those two questions are pretty important to us. Those are kind of full day questions that I want to actually talk about. I want to talk about the advantages and disadvantages to how you pay off your mortgage, whether you pay monthly payments, bi-weekly payments, bi-monthly payments, if you pay payments per year. What is the best way to talk about mortgages and how to pay them off? There's also another method where you pay, I believe it's monthly, and then at the end of the year, you have the opportunity to pay a lump sum down at no interest cost. So you could put, I can't remember what the name of it is, I have to look it up, but so what happens is you pay your monthlies, your 12 months of the year, you make your payments, and then at the end of the 12 months, they say, okay, you can pay as much as you want off on that mortgage at no interest cost to you. All right, so that helps you pay it down and helps keep the amount off of it. Mortgages are usually 15, 20, 25 years. Okay, some are 10-year mortgages, but mostly are 10. On a mortgage, you need to put a down payment. This is important for you to know. The first time that you purchase a mortgage for a house, they'll ask for 5% down. Anytime after that, they'll ask between 20 and 25% down. So that first time, it's called a first time homeowners. You get a big rebate off of the amount that you're going to have to need to put down, because they know that you don't have that kind of overhead right away. But that also means that if you're only putting 5% down, you're borrowing 95% of the cost of the house, right? So it takes you longer to pay it off. One thing that you will find is in a situation where you guys are, as opposed to renting a place, sometimes on a smaller house, the mortgage payment is less than what a rent cost is. What would be the advantage? What would be the disadvantage?
Mortgage are locked into it for a long time.
You are,
You could lose
but
it
it's yours.
anytime.
But you're right. What else?
You could lose it. Like if you don't pay it, you can just completely lose the house.
Yeah. But I mean, they'll remortgage you until you can figure out how to pay it back. Because the bank doesn't want to lose that money, right? Okay. What else would be an advantage of?
You have a house to sell.
You have a house to sell at the end of it for sure. That means that you have equity in that house because you're paying into it, right? One of the disadvantages, kind of to counter what you had said, CJ, is that you are now responsible for anything that's broken in your house. So you'd have to pay damages or get things fixed or whatever. You know, that's can be quickly a $1,200, $2,000 fee to fix a washing machine, to fix a dryer, to fix a fridge. You know, those things happen, right? Okay.
Can you like take money off of your mortgage or something or add to it, like to the renovation?
Yes. You can add on to your mortgage. You can, yeah. That's something you can deal with when you're going in. You could say, okay, the house costs $175,000, but I'd like to put $25,000 into renovations on the house. Can we add that into my mortgage? Yes, they'll do that. One of the things that this class doesn't do, which is unfortunate, that the Essentials class does, because I think this is a really, really good topic for you guys, is they teach you how to do maximum affordable mortgages. They'll tell you how. We actually have to do a little bit of that. I forgot. That is one of the things that we have to do. But so to figure out how much somebody can afford, they take your monthly heating costs, plus payments, plus property taxes.
Okay.
That's property taxes, and you divide it by your gross monthly income. And they times that by 100%. If that value, so they take your monthly payment on your house, add in your heating costs, add in your property taxes, and if they divide it into your gross income, if that number is over 32%, if you're paying more than 32% for your payments, your heating, and your property taxes, they won't give you the loan. This is called the gross. You want to make a note of this. It's not in your book, but we do have to do it for the exam, and we will talk more about it. It's called gross debt service ratio, and your gross debt service ratio must be less than 32% or they will not give you the loan. So then there's a little chart that adds in these values, and then it'll give you the maximum that you can afford on a house. But just make a note of this for today. This is actually given on the formula sheet that you get for the exam. They actually put that on there for you. But I always forget about it until I get back to the exam. So we're ahead of the game. I remember this time. So this is something that we have to look at, and we'll look at at the start of next week. I'll find a couple questions just to show you how it pertains to you. Okay? So basically what I need you to do today is finish as far as you can to the end of page 49. If you want to start on 7 and 8 and see if you can do it, that's great, but I'm going to do 7 and 8 with you tomorrow. Like I said, they are lengthy questions in which you need to see the steps. I'll get you to write the steps out, and you'll need them in order to do the question, because there's quite a bit of work to this question. But once you have the steps written out, you'll write it on your cheat sheet. It's not that hard to do. Okay? That's all I have for 4.4. Are there any questions from 4.1 to 4.3? Or sorry, 2. We're in chapter 2. Thinking that was 2.4.
Just a couple chapters.
Yeah, the grade 11s are there. That's what I'm thinking 4.
Why are they already?
They missed 1 and 2. I started on trip. Okay, 2.1 to 2.3. Any questions today?
Number 2 on page 44.
Okay. We're going to look, Morgan.
Yeah, I don't want to hear my voice on that video.